So welcome everyone. My name is Mary Eleanor Power and I am with Dalhousie University's Faculty of Open Learning and Career Development as the Marketing and Communications Director. And I'm really delighted to welcome Theresa Rath Spicer and Dawn Spicer, who will be co-hosting today's webinar, Building Your Impact and Influence Strategic Public Relations. I'd like to get us started by acknowledging that Dalhousie University is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq. Now, to get us started, I will introduce Dawn first. So Dawn Spicer was a police officer for 35 years, during which he was a skilled mediator, crisis negotiator, suicide intervention trainer, and a coordinator and instructor of critical incident training. All of these skills highly transferable to strategic communications. In 2019, this husband and wife team opened their own boutique public relations agency, which specializes in strategic communications, media relations, crisis communications, and issues management. They've also been instructors of Dalhousie University's Faculty of Open Learning and Career Development since 2018. Theresa and Dawn spend much of their time at their cottage on the North Shore of Nova Scotia, and I will just spend just a minute introducing Theresa as well, who is a public relations professional with a Bachelor of Public Relations, a Master of Arts in Communication, and 25 years communications experience. She's had the privilege of working with municipal police service, two international airlines, and an airport authority, providing strategic counsel to senior leaders in each of these roles. I am delighted. There's so much more to share in their bios, but I will leave the rest of the time for today's webinar, and we'll pass it over to Theresa and Dawn. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to include them in the chat, and we will get to them. We will leave plenty of time at the end to respond to any questions. So please don't be shy. And Theresa and Dawn, over to you. And I will end our poll for now, but let me just say that marketing was the winner overall. When you think of public relations, let me just share the results here. When you think of public relations, what comes to mind? So media relations was a close second. Marketing was the overall winner with 6 votes. Employee communications with 1, event management 2, and spin received 1 vote.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that introduction, Mary, and thanks to everyone for joining us today. We're happy, honored to co-host this webinar on how you can build your impact and influence through strategic public relations. We wanted to start out with this question just to give everybody get a sense for where everybody's minds are in terms of what they believe public relations is, because there's a lot of misconception about it. You'd be happy to know that all of your votes are right, although we would argue that spin is not really spin. It's kind of a dirty word in the PR field. Perhaps positioning and how you position something as opposed to spinning it, but spin is a typical word that's used in television shows and so on. So a lot of people tend to think of that when they think of PR.
We're just having a little technical difficulty. One moment. There we go.
Next one. Well, if your initial thoughts were public relations as an example, as being synonymous with media relations, you're not alone. Many of the more than 6 million business leaders who were interviewed by Entrepreneur think that public relations professionals, all they do is media relations. As you can see in this graphic, the one on the left saying what people think we do, versus on the right, what we really do. As you can see, there is so much more to public relations than simply media relations. There's no one aspect that would be totally correct.
So what is public relations? We'll share this definition with you. It comes from Canadian Public Relations Society. And it says that public relations is the strategic management of relationships between an organization and its diverse publics through the use of strategic communication. And that's with the goal of achieving mutual understanding, realizing organizational goals, and serving the public interest. And we'd like to focus on two particular words in this definition. And the first is relationships. So if you think about public relations, it's about relationships. It's about creating and maintaining strong, healthy relationships with an organization's publics. And that's the second word we want to zero in on, and that's publics. So we say we like to put the public in public relations, or define the public in public relations. A public is a group of people who have a relationship and importance to an organization and who face a common issue. Those are two definitions taken from the public relations, the world of public relations academia. We based on our experience, we like to add to that definition, and that's that a public can share a common interest. It's often that a public is united because of a shared or common interest. It's also worth noting, before I get into this particular slide, that you'll hear publics referred to as audiences as well, or as stakeholders, or sometimes you'll hear them referred to as customers or citizens, depending on the organization and the particular publics that they have. I think it's also worth noting that I had a professor in university who later became my thesis supervisor, actually, and a wonderful mentor to me. And this was in my first year of PR, long time ago. And she said that public relations is actually a misnomer, that it should be called publics relations. And the reason is because no organization has just one public. They have many publics, and also that no one public is homogeneous, that there's many different publics, that they have diverse needs. And that's why we get to this slide. It's important that we segment publics. You can't just consider them one homogeneous group, as I mentioned. You really should segment your publics into those with particular commonalities, like we talked about just a moment ago. So we segment them into internal and external, and also boundary spanners. And I'll just spend a few minutes defining those. So internal publics, it really is what it says it is. They're those within your organization. And that, of course, primarily would be your employees. And you can segment your employees. You don't want to consider them that one homogeneous group with just one need, one communications need. You need to segment them. And we're just going to break that down for you, give you a couple of examples. You might break them down into unionized versus non-unionized, administrative versus operational, those in leadership roles versus those on the front lines. You could even segment your internal audiences based on every internal unit or department within your organization and think about their defined communication needs. And that would be right from the bottom to the top of the organization. You could possibly segment them based on whether they're customer or citizen facing, or those who don't have interaction with your customers or citizens. And another really important way to segment your publics from an internal perspective is retirees. You never want to forget about your retiree group, because yes, every employee is an ambassador, but your retirees can go on to be great ambassadors for your organization. So they're very much an important internal public. So moving from internal to external, again, it's like it sounds. External publics are those outside of your organization. And examples are citizens and customers, various levels of government, media, shareholders or investors, your suppliers, etc. And I'd just like to help you segment those a little bit further. And I'll use two examples. The first being government. So you would want to segment government based on local government, provincial government, federal government. And you may even want to segment further, say within the provincial government, what departments are the most important to you? So in our world of policing, of course, it was the Department of Justice that was particularly important, but also the Premier's office. Same thing when I went on to work for the Airport Authority. It was very important, of course, to work with Department of Transportation as an example. So you really want to think about your individual needs and how you could segment those audiences. Another great example of segmenting external publics is media. And again, you'd want to segment that based on local media, international media, national media. You may also want to break that down by accredited media versus those who are citizen bloggers, as an example. And looking at each public and how you can further segment those publics so that you can communicate with them effectively. Finally, this is a word that we came up with from our studies, but also our experience in policing, and that's boundary spanners. It's not something that I learned in PR school, but certainly through the practice of PR. And boundary spanners are those publics that really could be considered to have a foot in both worlds, both internal and external. And they usually have influence both internally and externally. And in many cases, they'll require more information that you might provide publicly, but probably less information that you might provide internally. And I'll give you two great examples. One is a board of directors or a board of governors, and another is your volunteers. So if you were communicating something, an important project, you might need to think about, okay, well, what do I need to tell my board of directors? And it might be more than you would tell, say, your average employee, but not as much as you would tell your executive team. And with respect to volunteers, I'll rely on my world at the airport. I was in charge of the volunteers there. If you've ever been to Halifax, and those of you who are in Halifax, you might have seen the volunteers who wear the tartan vests. And we would really arm them with as much information as possible to help them be great wayfinders and great ambassadors with passengers and people visiting the airport. So they required more information than we would give to the general public, probably, but probably not as much as we would give every single employee. But all of that is to say that boundary spanners are really integral public that you need to consider. So it's that public that has, as we say, a foot in both worlds and influence both internally and externally.
If I could just add quickly to that, it's not only what you tell them, but it's when you tell them. Ideally, you want to tell your internal publics and your boundary spanners what's happening before you go to your external publics.
It's a really good point. Thanks for adding on there.
So now that we've discussed what PR actually is, who do you believe is responsible for it in an organization? If we could get you to pop your thoughts into the chat, that would be great.
So you'll find your chat, the chat at the bottom here. So I'm just popping in. And for those who aren't familiar with Zoom, you'll probably find that the chat function at the bottom here. You can certainly add it to the Q&A option as well, but we'd love to hear from you. So someone is, Laura has added in here, everyone. Who do you believe is responsible for PR? Everyone. It's an interesting one. Everyone associated with the organization to some degree, every employee, marketing department, if we have one, business development people, director and communications group, everyone but managed under marketing department guidance, communications. Everyone.
Sounds like we have lots of knowledgeable people.
Yeah.
That's great, yeah. Any other comments? Anything outside of what has been jotted down here? So we have lots of marketing department, business development, everyone but managed, guided by marketing department, contractors and subcontractors. It's another one. Yeah. Great.
Excellent.
Real variety there. Okay.
All very great answers. Yes, so we have a lot of gold stars to give out today because many people, even business leaders across the country, believe that it's your public relations department that's responsible for public relations in your organization. This slide really says it all, and I think you've already answered it, and obviously you know what we're talking about. The public relations is everyone's job. Whether you're a new employee or retiree on the front lines, an executive, customer facing, or behind the scenes, everyone in the organization has a role to play in effective PR.
And I love, if I may just jump in there, that someone said that it is everyone's responsibility, but under the guidance of a public relations team or communications team, marketing communications, and also your executive team. So that's a really good point. Thank you for adding that.
That's key. And we actually spend a lot of time trying to convince leaders that that's the way they should be working. So it's good to hear that other people feel the same way. As we discussed earlier, PR is about building and maintaining relationships with an organization's publics. An organization may have an individual or a whole unit dedicated to the PR function, but they can't and don't bear the entire responsibility for effective PR in that organization. Why? because every employee has the ability to forge or damage relationships, whether it's with internal publics, external publics, boundary spanners, or all of them. It's incumbent on each employee to espouse the values of the organization, provide excellence in customer service both internally and externally, and impart the organization's corporate position on initiatives and issues. In a similar vein, each employee is an ambassador of the organization and its brand in the public image. Every interaction, action, or inaction has the ability to impact the brand and image of the organization. I believe that ultimately we're all in a customer service role and everyone is our customer. And this is never more evident than in the role of PR.
I think that's so true. And we hope that we're sharing that with you, that you'll walk away from this session really believing that. So you may be wondering though, what's all the fuss about PR? And really, what's in it for me? What's in it for my organization? How does this apply to me? It sounds like some of you have already bought into the fact that it applies to you, and we really appreciate that. But as we've discussed, effective PR and communication is not just a function, as we've already covered. It's not just performed by a PR person or a PR team. It really should be an organizational philosophy that's ingrained in the corporate culture. And ultimately, it should be a foundational element of an organization's strategic plan. And it also should be incorporated into an organization's annual business plan. And if it isn't, we hope that someone in your organization will be able to push it in that direction. Anyone who wants to be part of an effective organization, particularly anyone who's striving to advance in an organization or move forward in their career, really needs to embrace this philosophy about PR being everyone's responsibility. And if that's the case, it will end up being an integral leadership skill, which will help you become a solid, multifaceted communicator. And they will help you be focused on building and maintaining relationships with internal and external publics, as well as boundary spanners. And all of that will help you achieve organizational strategies and outcomes. So you're really helping your organization to move forward, and you're helping it to develop relationships with key publics. And that, all of that in turn will enhance your own skill set and also enhance your career.
I know from my perspective, I went through a lot of different positions in the organization and promotions in the organization that required competing for those spots. And I'm convinced that effective PR and communications and relationship building were the key to my success. And also as a hiring manager who conducted hundreds of interviews for hirings, transfers, and promotions, the most important thing that I look for in a candidate is their ability to communicate effectively and build relationships.
That's a great jumping off point, because we believe that if you embrace responsibility for the PR function, you will hone the key skills that Don's talking about that helped him be successful. And many of those are leadership skills, so they can help to catapult your career. These can be broken down into professional competencies and technical competencies. The professional competencies will make you a solid communicator who's relationship focused, who is a critical strategic thinker, who exercises sound judgment, who is politically savvy and astute, and practices teamwork, ethics, and professionalism at every turn. The technical competencies that you'll gain through embracing the PR function are PR knowledge. So you'll learn things like publics and boundary spanners and about key messaging. You'll also become aware of the importance of media relations, and you'll become savvy in that skill. And also the same thing applies for social media and PR in a digital landscape, becoming aware of the importance of that and savvy in that regard as well. We believe that embracing PR will also make you a solid writer and editor, and that can be used in every role and in every facet of your life. And overall, this will just make you an excellent communicator. So we appreciate your responses so far. We think that you're on the right track, and we believe that if you do embrace PR and your responsibility for it, you'll walk away with these professional competencies and technical competencies.
Mm-hmm. Okay, when we're preparing for this webinar with Mary Eleanor, she suggested that perhaps if we share a real-life example, it would be beneficial. So the example we're providing, we're hoping it will show you one situation where we came at things from a different angle. We used the same philosophy, and as a result, we had success through effective PR. It's worth noting at this juncture that before we were husband and wife, business partners, and co-instructors at Dalhousie, we were colleagues. I was a police officer at Halifax Regional Police, and Theresa was their public relations manager. We've selected an example which demonstrates how everyone has a role to play in PR. In 2006, an American sailor was stabbed to death in downtown Halifax. And this was on top of other violent crimes such as assaults and robberies, as well as a culture of alcohol use and abuse and overconsumption. As a result, the mayor commissioned a roundtable on violence and public safety. From this, there were 64 recommendations, one of which was to create a dedicated public safety officer role, and then that person's role was to then implement the other 63 recommendations. I was named the public safety officer for the municipality in 2008. I was responsible for creating and implementing a strategic plan. I also consulted and partnered with internal and external stakeholders, including 3 levels of government, faith and community groups, the corporate community, and police employees. My team and I spearheaded many related projects, and I served as the lead spokesperson. I also published a blog, newsletter, and social media posts. One of the related projects they undertook that comes to mind as an example of the importance of forging relationships with the media and other stakeholders is a gun amnesty program. A gun amnesty is a program where people can turn in unwanted firearms without fear of reprisal for not having them properly registered or stored. The thought around this is the more guns you get out of the community, the safer it is, the less likely they'll end up in the wrong hands by being stolen or being involved with an accidental discharge with children, for example. So previously, the most guns that we were able to get off the street in a gun amnesty was 40. I partnered with Henry's Cameras, who agreed to donate a camera to everyone who turned in a gun. Through strong relationships with the media and a solid social media campaign, we removed 1,100 guns and 10,000 rounds of ammunition from our community. The campaign was such a success and garnered so much media exposure that we received inquiries from police departments across the country on how they could replicate our efforts.
It's a great example, and there's so many more we could share, but we wanted to really pick one that was quite holistic and very strategic and helping us to achieve communication goals as well as public safety goals. So while Don was doing all of that work, as he mentioned, I was the public relations manager, so I was responsible for a team of communicators and strategic communicators and public relations professionals. And we, as a team, were working with Don to create a communication strategy to support his office. And that included documenting a communication plan for pretty much every initiative, including the gun amnesty that he spoke about. And we also created a social media strategy. I actually did that as part of my master's degree. I worked with 2 of my peers in school, and we created a social media strategy for the public safety office. And then my team was also responsible for producing all communications collateral associated with Don's office. So you name it, we produced it. But it was things like the newsletter that he spoke about. He may write it, but we would edit it and provide counsel. His blog, same thing. Posters, media releases, sponsorships, communications collateral of every kind, essentially. And we would also be responsible for coaching him on media relations. He really didn't need it. I actually came into the police service when Don was the media relations officer, and he actually coached me, but my team was responsible for coaching him and his team in media relations endeavors, and also providing strategic counsel on social media. So, and I think it's also worth mentioning that as crimes happen, so if a homicide happened, myself or my team would be responsible for media relations in the moment. So not every inquiry about a crime would be elevated to Don's office. It would stay with myself and my team. We had a dedicated police officer to media relations. When that police officer was on vacation, I would actually step in as the spokesperson. So I would handle that day of communications, and we would be responsible for all the strategic messaging. And when we got questioned about the more holistic approach to crime, then we would elevate it to Don or possibly even to the chief. And it's worth noting that Don and I collaboratively would be working with the chief's office and also with the mayor's office, providing strategic counsel on communications as to what they should say when they were questioned about the day-to-day crimes or a crime spree, or as it related to the mayor's roundtable on violence overall. And I think I just hit on the key word, and that was collaboration. Collectively and collaboratively was really how we worked. And it was a coordinated approach, a collaborative approach. Never did I or my team operate in isolation of Don and his team. So we were in lockstep with one another. We knew what each other was doing. We worked in partnership. And all of that was all of that was with the goal of striving to achieve common communication goals. And again, as Don mentioned at the very beginning, really coming at it with the same communications philosophy, the same communication goals, all of which would have been charted out in the communication strategy we set out for his office when it was first formed. So I hope that example really helps you to understand the impact and influence we had in our organization, working with stakeholders, working with mayor's office, with the chief's office, working with one another, whether I was coming at it from the PR world or he was coming at it from more of a policing realm.
So all of that working together over all those years, and we're back, please.
Yep, sorry.
And we're still married. So to build on what Theresa was saying, what's interesting is that I came at all of this from a public safety background, whereas Theresa and her team came at it through a purely PR communications background. We found that while we have different experience and backgrounds, we found that if you're approaching an issue with the same philosophy, that it ultimately leads to PR success, both internally and externally. We were focused on the same communication goals and organizational outcomes, which led to our success. When I retired in 2012, we had completed 87% of the recommendations. And most all of these recommendations really were the responsibility of some other level of government. So that entailed a lot of working, team building, and working with other organizations and stakeholders to make things happen. The other 13% of the recommendations were in various forms of implementation when I left. We would not have had success without a focus on communications and public relations, nor would our publics have realized all that we had accomplished without that focus. So we hope that this example reinforces that everyone has a role to play in PR, whether you're an executive team, PR team, or a frontline employee.
So as we say, and jumping off from what Don just said, we hope that that gives you a sense of public relations and our role and how you do have influence and impact in organization, regardless of what position you hold. And that would include Don's team and my team as well, the chief of police, the mayor, as we mentioned. So everything we've discussed today will be covered in greater detail in our course that's coming up from mid-September to mid-December over a course of 12 weeks. And as Mary Eleanor mentioned, the name of that course is Building Your Impact and Influence, Strategic Public Relations. It is a brand new course. We've developed it over the last number of months, and we're super passionate about it, as I hope you can tell. It is an online course that will present opportunities for you to learn on your own, and also with and from your peers and instructors during weekly online classes. And I'd like to just take a moment to explain how the course will be structured. It will actually have 3 key sections with defined learning outcomes. In the first section, we'll discuss the fundamentals of PR, much of which we talked about here today. It will cover an introduction to the discipline, a little bit of a history of the discipline, the requisite skills for public relations, including writing and editing, which we've already talked about, as well as public speaking. So really arming you with all those tools that you need to be an effective writer, editor, and public speaker. And all of that will allow you to apply the fundamental facets of public relations and form a strong foundation from which you can build your PR skills. The second section will discuss the key disciplines of PR, and it will cover internal and external communication, media relations, social media and PR in a digital landscape, brand, image, reputation management, crisis communications, and issues management. Phew, a lot. But all of that will give you an in-depth description of each specialty and why it's important and how it's done. So you will walk away with some really tangible skills on how you can work in each of those disciplines of PR. And then there's the third and final section. It's called Strategic Elements of PR. And it will cover the communication strategy, the communication plan. So some of the things that I mentioned that I was responsible for creating to support Dawn's public safety officer role. It will also cover communication auditing, corporate social responsibility, and PR ethics. Again, a lot, but this will allow you to examine and apply the strategic elements and explore how PR is best practiced as a strategic management function, where everyone has responsibility, but it is very much supported and believed in by the strategic management team. And all of that will really help to guide the organization to success and help achieve organizational outcomes. And we believe it will also help you to achieve your professional goals. And all of that to say is that we believe it will be a great learning journey. As I mentioned, we're super passionate about it. We love what we do, and we hope that you'll consider joining us.
Well, we talked a lot and we talked fast, trying to squeeze a lot of information into a short period of time. But we'd now like to turn the floor over to you for questions or comments and anything that you might have in relation to the material we just covered or the upcoming course. And Mary Eleanor, I'm not sure if that goes in chats or Q&A or what's best for you.
Yeah, no, I'm just as we had said previously. So if you wish to include questions in the Q&A or in the chat, feel free. There was just a question from Lynn, and it was around the example. Just maybe if you can provide more details, Dawn, on just the structure of how that partnership with Henry's that you mentioned. And for those who aren't familiar, Henry's is gosh, how would I describe them? They're just a franchise that sells kind of cameras, video taping equipment, and other technology like that.
Sure. Well, there's a bit of a funny story in relation to that, but actually, when I came up with the idea of trying to provide some incentive to make people want to turn their guns in and notice this campaign, I thought about Halifax and the history and the cannon on the Citadel Hill. And so I contacted the Canon Canada rep for Atlantic Canada. And I said, if you donate one camera and I buy one camera, we'll put everybody's name into a draw. And everybody that turns a gun in, put their name in a draw and offer a prize. And I said we could promote it like shoot a cannon, not a gun, try to get the play on the cannon off Citadel Hill thing and a Canon camera. I'm not a marketer, sorry. They said, sorry, it's not in their budget for the year. So I contacted Henry's Camera. I proposed the same thing. And they said, no, we'll give a camera to every person that turns in a gun. How many do you think you'll get? I said, well, we got 40 last time, so we might, maybe 100.
Oh my gosh.
We can cap it. No, don't cap it, as many as you get. So we got 1,100 guns, they get 1,100 cameras. And of the ammunition, everybody that turned in ammunition, they gave away a certificate for free photo lessons. So wow. They were very happy to get on board with that. And then they actually partnered in at least one other city in Canada on a similar mission.
And we were able to leverage their relationships with, I'll straight up with the Chronicle Herald, because they did so much advertising. Mm-hmm. The Chronicle Herald was able to do some coverage of the campaign to help us promote it.
Yeah, they actually gave Henry's a full page ad for the campaign because they gave him so much business. So it was great.
So it really shows the power and the influence of marketing and public relations that we were able to jump off their advertising opportunities to promote the campaign. But we also, I can't say enough good about local media. It is about relationships. When I was at Halifax Regional Police, we really prided ourselves on a strong relationship with media. Really, there was no media request that we turned down, whether it was a journalism student. It didn't matter. We treated every request the same, and we prided ourselves on that. And I think it really helped us. So when we promoted this campaign, they came out, pretty much every outlet in the city covered this campaign. And we really couldn't have afforded to buy that kind of coverage.
No, and it was a win-win because Henry's was getting good public relations press out of that as well.
It's really interesting. It's it really speaks to kind of the cultural piece, like within an organizational culture, where you place value. We're all stretched for time in our personal, professional lives. And, where do you place your focus? And how is that reinforced from the top down? And so I just want to, I'm hoping that Martin can, I'm not sure if you have your chat open there, Theresa and Don, but Martin's just added a comment in here indicating that their light bulb moment was that the relations part is their area for exploration. Relations being in quotation, something on the one-on-one aspect. I haven't developed the thought fully yet. So maybe Martin, you can elaborate on that a little bit. And maybe let me try to interpret this a little bit. Maybe Theresa and Don kind of, are you referring to kind of those one-on-one relationships? Yes, okay. And so are perhaps one thing that I know that I find in my work with when it comes to one-on-one relationships, and maybe Theresa and Don, you can speak to this, it's just, from a strategic perspective, understanding how you need to modify your approach to get the most out of those one-on-one relationships. And maybe Martin, that will help you kind of develop this thought further. And if you have other questions, feel free to add them in the chat. But Theresa and Don, I love to hear your thoughts on that.
It's a really great question. It really is about knowing your audience or knowing your public and understanding their communication needs. And I'll use media relations as an example because I've just spoken about it with the gun amnesty and Henry's camera. With media relations, it really was about, it was a communication goal to have strong media relations in the organization and to have strong relationships with media outlets. But then I would say I've never really treated one journalist the same as another, because the way in which they communicate, certainly all the same values, same communications philosophy, but my relationship with a reporter at the Herald who could be a little bit prickly, say, versus someone who was warm and fuzzy would be very different. So it was all about knowing that person, getting to know them on an individual basis, and kind of winning them over. So and really making sure that I was meeting their needs as well. But in some ways, it's about getting to know that person on an individual level and appealing to them. So this reporter that I'm speaking of, and I think the world of him, even though he was a little prickly at times, he loved to travel and I love to travel. So that's sometimes what we would end up talking about. So it was about that individual relationship while at the same time ensuring that I was giving him what he needed, providing prompt responses to his questions, getting back to him quickly, ensuring that I was, as I say, meeting his communication needs, while at the same time meeting the communication needs of the organization. I hope that helps. And Don, please jump in.
Yeah, certainly. And one thing we cover a lot more in the course is that timing for building relationships. You need to build those relationships in the good time, not during a crisis. The first time that you talk to somebody shouldn't be 2 o'clock in the morning when your warehouse is on fire or something is going on in your organization, and you need to have those relationships. So it's during the quiet times, I guess. And for me, I think the relationships, I've always looked at it from a perspective of how it can be a win-win. So I've never gone anywhere with all of those collaborations I did. If you recall back when I said that most of the recommendations in the roundtable report, even though I worked for a city, were the responsibility of the province or the federal government. I never went to them saying, please help me do my job. I went with them with the attitude of, how can we work together so that we both better achieve our goals? And I think that's key in a relationship moving forward.
Yeah, and Martin, I mean, I just want to highlight your comment here that you always ignorantly thought of PR as broadcasting rather than narrowcasting, and I love that distinction that you've created. And you're not blathering on and hogging the time at all. I think it's a really good point. And and I think for it emphasizes the fact that PR can be, and the influence of PR and the way that we practice it can sometimes get overlooked. And so the importance of it can get overlooked because you can look at it, the impact of it on a really granular one-on-one relationship basis. And then you can also look at it kind of from the strategic perspective. And I I would love to just ask a question, if that's okay, and feel free to ask other questions that you have, those who are still joining us, around the third section of the course that talks about communication auditing, because I think when you look at it from the strategic level, you know, it's important to understand, or to have an understanding of, how are we going to measure the impact? How are we going to measure that? How are we going to audit our work? So maybe you can speak to that a little bit, Theresa and Don. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure. A communication audit really looks at your organization and how it's communicating, what it's communicating, with whom it's communicating, and it really strives to measure all of that, whether it's effective or ineffective. And I think, I'll be very candid, that is the one thing that I think is missing in public relations quite often, is it often doesn't have the budget behind it to do measurement before and after campaigns, as an example. Especially, I know in our municipal government world, there was not a lot of money to go around, so you were always looking to do communications on a shoestring, which is very difficult. But ultimately, you should be measuring everything before you do communications, and then that's your benchmark, and then measuring after to see if you've been successful in reaching your audiences with your key messaging and with your communication tactics. And so really what an audit does, and we talk about this in the course, but it really can be done by an internal PR department, or you may even want to hire a consultant, again, depending on your budget, to critically evaluate your communication. And the reason for that is to really understand, is it effective? Are you tied to something, doing something because you've done it that way forever? And really looking at, is it even reaching your audience? Also looking at new means of communication and what you need to be doing. So based on that audit, we recommend doing a communication strategy after it. So you incorporate what you learned from your audit, devise a brand new strategy, or update your strategy so that you're communicating effectively. And it can be very powerful to show some stats about your communications to your management team, about what's working, not working, where you need to put your efforts. I hope that answers your question.
No, yeah, that's fantastic. And Martin's just added another comment here. Ironically, they're the health and safety auditor and operate a provincial forestry safety auditing program in BC. And I'm sure that, I'm so glad that you've joined us, Martin. And I hope that there are others who perhaps saw value in taking part in this webinar, even if they don't work in a formal PR, communications, or marketing role. Because I'm sure that, you know, from a health and safety standpoint, I mean, communications is such a critical element to the proper functioning of that, I'm sure, of your role. Yeah, that's really interesting. And I'm wondering, I just would love to throw the question out to the group here and see, has anyone who's joining us in this webinar taken part in a communications audit, and may want to share some insights or reactions from that experience. And so I'll just pause here for a moment and give people an opportunity to offer some comments in the chat. So the question is, have you participated in a communications audit? And if so, what were some of the takeaways?
I love that question, Mary Eleanor, because it may even be, if you're doing an effective audit, it should include both qualitative and quantitative research. So it may be that someone was involved in a focus group, as an example, just asking what's effective in their world of communication. Even as an employee, from employee communications, there should be employee surveys about how they're being communicated with, what's effective, what the gaps are.
It really can be on its very basic ground. It can be just internally looking at how are we communicating? Is it working? If not, can we make it work? If not, should we get rid of it? And what else should we be doing? And we do, actually, that's my favorite part of the course, because that's one of the course, one of the course assignments.
Oh, awesome. Oh, interesting. So so Martin has added a comment here that there are 3,300 audited employers and 20,000 employees in BC Forest Safety. They have a media communications group that you're not in. That's interesting. And I certainly think that, there would be value in at least kind of contributing or seeing. Maybe perhaps the takeaway from this webinar is that you're just an ops guy or slash supervisor.
No, just.
No, you're not. We're not just anything. Perhaps there is an opportunity even just to reach out to the communications group to see if there is a chance, even just to get to know what they do, what they focus on, and how you might be able to take part. Sometimes it is just that kind of initial step of just of reaching out and initiating that contact that can create that
Happy to hear from them.
communication. And sorry, go ahead, Theresa and Don.
Oh, I'm just saying, I think they would be very happy to hear from an operational person to know that they want to partake in something like that.
Something that I have found in managing communications departments is you can't do it alone, as we've talked about, and PR is everyone's responsibility. And what you really need is ambassadors across the organization to help you impart your messages, whether it's internally or externally. So Martin, you could be an amazing ambassador and partner to that communications and media relations group.
Yeah, absolutely. Messaging communicates a different, okay, a technical. So he's indicating a technical communicator, not a messaging communicator. It's a different scope, or something I've not fully figured out yet. Okay.
And it could be both. It could be that you're helping to impart their messages, but technically, yeah, we need technical communicators. And I think that's another really good point is, as communicators, we often have to know a little bit about everything, but we can never have the knowledge that you have as someone in the field, as an operations supervisor. And it can be really helpful to be that, again, an ambassador, but also someone that the communications department can lean on to learn your skill and craft and learn the technical terms and then use that in their messaging, whether it's internal or external, in a media interview, as examples. That's great. Martin is saying that.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
You go ahead.
No, I didn't see the comment there. You go ahead, Theresa and Don. Yeah, feel free.
Martin is saying that he gets the official messages and taglines and themes to include and contribute to official newsletters. And I love that, because we do need those ambassadors across the organization. And it really helps that you're imparting those messages to your publics.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to add in the chat here just the link to the course itself, so you can see the syllabus in more detail. And I do want to, I'm mindful of our time, but I do want to just actually highlight one of the components of the course that would scare me the most. And it has to do with the speeches and presentations. And so there might be those who are joining us in the webinar who perhaps don't see themselves, or their role doesn't require them to speak publicly, to deliver speeches and that sort of thing. So what I'm hoping, Theresa and Don, you can kind of speak to is the relevance of this for people, this component of the course, for those who are in a whole variety of different roles that may even not have any communications component to it. So love your thoughts on that.
Well, communications and public relations really are synonymous, and verbal communication, able to get your message across clearly, is something that's very important. So that is one aspect of it. I can tell you, I don't know if it's reassuring or not, but we've taught a media relations course like over several days to, I would say, hundreds of people.
Yes.
And most of them are not people who are responsible to do media interviews, but may be called upon because of their expertise. For instance, an operational supervisor might have to talk about something that's technical that they know more about than anyone else. So we do, there's not a lot of role playing in this course, there's a little bit, but we do a fair amount in the media relations course. And I would say almost all of the exit interviews and items that people fill out at the end is that we need more time for practice. So if they go into it, they don't want to say anything. They're sitting back, don't pick on me. And by the end, they're saying, oh, we need to do that more. And they're come up with so much more confidence than they ever thought they could possibly have.
Mm-hmm.
Really what we're trying to teach by covering public speaking and media relations is that you can craft a message and you can tell a story. And in doing that, we want you to have the confidence. And so the practice will help you get there. And so you may learn about public speaking and media relations, but it could help you just speak in a meeting better, and form your message better for a meeting, or during a round table, or in a classroom setting, or whatever it may be, in a boardroom as a volunteer. We really just want to help you gain confidence to be an effective public speaker in every realm of your life. And one thing we teach in the course is the importance of key messaging and formulating key messages that are for a particular audience or public. So public speaking and media relations will do all of that and more.
Oh, that's great. That's fantastic. And Martin is offering some thoughts on this, that they used to be afraid and nothing bad happened, so the barrier shrank, and now shutting him up is the challenge. But it took 35 years, and it is an ongoing practice. And it is lifelong skill development, because over the course of anyone's career, you're going to encounter many different personalities and have to work with many different groups. So yeah, I think that's just a given. And you know, I am mindful of our time, and I do want to just take a moment to reinforce some of what Theresa and Dawn have mentioned already. So I did include a link to the course itself, and just wanted to highlight a reminder that this is an online course. And so it's 100% online, and you can expect to spend a minimum of 3 hours a week on coursework. Let me just pause there for a moment. So Theresa just made a comment: be helpful if chat comments were sent to attendees as well as panelists. Please mention this in the future. Absolutely, Theresa, and my apologies. So I should have mentioned here, so if you have in the chat, if you click down, you'll see the to column, and it says all panelists and attendees. So I have my comments, when I add comments in the chat, I've indicated that I want them to go to all panelists and attendees. So if you do have comments, you can, for some, it may have defaulted only to show your comments to the panelists. And that's fine, Martin, not a trouble at all. But yes, if you indicate all panelists and attendees, then everyone can see your comments. And so if you do have any questions, and you did have it only sending to all panelists, feel free to add those comments and questions now if you wish. And just going back to the course itself. So this course has been designed knowing full well that a lot of the learners will already be working either full-time, part-time, and have other competing priorities. So it's very much designed to be completed based on the busy schedules that you might already have, along with some time for scheduled meetings that Theresa and Dawn will facilitate. So I hope that has provided for all of you just some insight into the course matter itself, but also just through the examples that you've been able to provide, Theresa and Dawn, just some insights and some takeaways that hopefully you can apply to all of your jobs today or tomorrow or in the near future. So if you choose not to enroll in the course, we truly hope that you've taken something away from this webinar. And so I'll just pause there for a moment if there are any final questions. Otherwise, we will wrap up for our hour. And Theresa and Dawn, if you have any final comments to add, feel free.
The only thing I was going to add is that we hope that we've explained what PR is, and that we've maybe debunked the myth that it is just media relations or it is spin, and that it is marketing. For me, there's a very important delineation between marketing and public relations. marketing, you're really marketing a product or a service. And I think in public relations, you're really promoting an organization to its publics through key messaging and communication tactics. And it's all very strategic in nature. Not that marketing isn't, because I think it is, but there is an important delineation. So we hope that we've clarified what PR is and what it isn't, and that the course would do that even further if you're able to join us. And if not, we really appreciate your time today.
Right, and just to build on what Eleanor said a couple of minutes ago, is the course is not intended to turn people into public relations professionals. It's intended for people from all walks of life who want to better their communication skills, better be able to communicate effectively with coworkers and their bosses and their partners. It'll help you actually in your private life as well. And I think it's important to note that this is not a course on how to become a public relations professional, but perhaps have a better understanding of what they do and how you play a role in that.
Yeah, really important. And so thank you, Theresa and Dawn, and thank you for including your email addresses here. And I'll just emphasize that later today, you'll be receiving an email that will have a recording of today's webinar if you'd like to rewatch any points, or if you'd like to share with your peers, share that recording with your peers. That will be hosted on our YouTube channel. So you'll be getting that email later today with that recording, along with a link to the course. You can explore it further, as well as Theresa and Dawn's contact information that's included on the screen here. It will be included in that email. So look for that before the end of your workday today. And thanks so much, everyone, for joining. Really appreciate it, and really appreciate your time putting this webinar together, Theresa and Dawn, and offering such thoughtful insights into this subject matter. It's so important, and we hope that everyone enjoys the rest of your day. And I'm glad that people are adding in their comments of thanks. So thank you from Rebecca and Theresa. Thank you for the information. It was very useful. I'm just jaded from 35 years in the federal public service being muzzled from speaking for a majority of that time. Yeah, it just emphasizes the fact that everyone's coming into this webinar with varied experiences in communications throughout their careers. So I'm glad. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Don.
No, I'm saying that's really great to see that there's people from various walks of life.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, we
All
really
right, well, take care, everyone, and thank you again, and we hope to see you in the course in the fall, and if not, enjoy the rest of your day, and good luck in your communications endeavors in the future.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Mary Eleanor, for the opportunity.
Thank you. All right, take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.